I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. You're listening to the Inside Carolina podcast, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Take a second to rate us and review us on however you get your podcast content, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, any of that. Drop us a rating and review. Also, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe. You get Inside Carolina content, comes straight to your phone. Can't beat it. Ton of it. Football season is here. Carolina wins 31-6 over Syracuse in Kenan Stadium. With that means the day after podcast. I am Tommy Ashley. As I've said, if you're on YouTube, you know that to my left is Mr. Buck Sanders, president of Inside Carolina and regular on the day after podcast. And down at the bottom in virtual, well, it's Sunday, so I won't say that, but in a heated situation, Mr. Jason Staples joins the show.
This is fine.
Guy, Jason, I'll come to you in just a second, but Buck, we've been watching Carolina football for years and talking about wins, especially P5 wins, after the first week of the season hadn't been a thing too much. The last person to have back-to-back wins in P5 openers was a guy named Mac Brown back in the 90s. Mac has done it again, but Syracuse comes in, leaves town with a whooping, ultimate whooping. Your overall thoughts on what you saw Saturday?
Well, the way I mainly look at it is if you're playing the expectations game, you came into this game thinking that North Carolina's offense was going to set the world on fire. And you came into it with a little bit of concern about the defensive line and how the defense was going to do, if they were going to be better and all of that. And if you're going to measure the Syracuse game against those expectations, then UNC's offense didn't play well. And North Carolina's defense played very well. Don't look now, but guess who's number one in the nation in defensive passing per yards attempt?
Wow. Said never.
8.65.
They're like top 10 in every defensive category in the nation. I don't really expect that to hold up over the course of the season. In fact, I know it won't hold up over the course of the season. It might still look good after the Charlotte game, but if you were just thinking about it in terms of your expectations of, how this game was going to go, what it might look like, you come out saying, wow, the defense looks great. Or if you're Tommy Ashley and you predicted North Carolina would score 52 points, you might say, wow, this offense is really underwhelming me here. So, I think it's at the point where we should put our expectations behind us a little bit. I think North Carolina's offense did what they had to do. I think Syracuse sort of took away the deep ball from them, and I think they had the scheme and the personnel to do that. I don't think every team will. And I don't think that North Carolina is going to face another offense quite as overwhelmed as Syracuse offense was yesterday.
Inept might be a good word.
Huh?
Inept might be a word for Syracuse's offense.
And
bad.
Before yesterday, everybody might have thought Syracuse was the 14th best team in the league. Now I think after yesterday, they're going to say that Syracuse is the 15th. After Georgia Tech's win over this other team in Tallahassee.
You're gonna put Syracuse behind Florida State?
No, Georgia Tech.
So yeah, and then you put Florida State at 16th, right there.
Wow.
Yeah, he's not going for the debate, is he, Tommy?
He is not. Watching that, we're not getting sidetracked. This is the Inside Carolina podcast, but watching that Georgia Tech Florida State game, I see all these guys on Florida State sidelines, and I'm thinking that's a dang near pro team, and they play like a dang near high school team. They have issues Jason, I'll let you handle that with your Florida State brethren. I was going to start on offense for Carolina, but let's start on the defensive side of the ball, Jason. In my pregame show, I stole from Taylor Viplis, and I said Tamari Fox might be the breakout guy. I thought he looked really good against Syracuse. And Syracuse had some – we talked about their mishmash offensive line, but they had a couple guys up there that had played and been successful. But I thought Fox, Tamari, both of them actually, both Foxes, looked really good yesterday.
I think you're right. I actually thought it was kind of fun at different points watching those guys involved in end tackle. Well, I guess it's outside linebacker, technically, but edge tackle stunts where you'd see the one brother go one place and the other brother go the other place, and it's still a Fox coming through that hole, but it's just a different one than how they were lined up, and it was kind of fun realizing that that's a pair of brothers, but yeah, I think what we saw up front, and again, it's a bad offensive line that they played. I want to emphasize that, because not everybody that they're going to play is going to be that overmatched in that sense. But what we saw from the defensive front was, for the most part, I mean, as I went through my preseason scouting reports, I gave, this is the stuff that you hope gets improved here. Here's where you hope this guy steps into this role and is able to do this and this, because here's a limitation, but can he do this? If he can do this, then they'll be okay. For the most part, we saw from that front, those guys did in game one what I was suggesting needed to be done at those spots. I mean, the guy that stood out to me the most is actually Vohasek. In terms of his ability to both compress the pocket. I mean, there were a couple times where he had the center in the lap of the quarterback, or basically driving him back into the running back. So he had that, and then there were other times where he was able to win with quickness on some things. And then you add that Tamari, like you said, stood out as well. I mean, 2 sacks on the day. You're looking at 2 guys that really needed to be good for Carolina and needed to take a step forward for Carolina to be what they're hoping to be this year. And both guys appeared to me to have taken a nice step forward from last year. I mean, neither guy is quite what they had from, the pair that they had last year, but you can't expect that. But it looked very encouraging to me from those spots. I think those 2 guys in particular, it was encouraging to see all day.
But when I look at that, we've talked, and if Carolina can figure out a guy to command the double team there, like Jason said, Vohasek was able to he's going to have to eventually, he's going to command that double team that Carolina needs. But benefiting from that, I think, is your linebacker play. And we've talked about Chaz Surratt forever, but I thought Jeremiah Gemmel looked like a different player. I mean, he was good last year at times. He looked like, if I had to pick the 2 and I didn't know which one of those guys was Chaz Surratt or which one of those guys had the height, yesterday I would have said it was the Gemmel fella. But that's big for Carolina to have not 1, but now 2 linebackers that are just playing at flat-out stud levels.
That's true. And although Gemmel did get beat, he came out late, and when he was dropping the cover he was lined up on the right. He was supposed to come out to the left and cover a guy, and DeVito had him for one of the best completions they had yesterday. But yeah, you're right. Gemmel is playing at a high level, and we were talking about, Jason was just talking about that the 2 interior linemen, Vohasek, who bowling balled DeVito in the backfield using a Syracuse offensive lineman, and Tamari Fox aren't quite at the level of Crawford and Strobridge at this point. But you have to think about everybody else on the team, including Gemmel, Surratt, Tamon Fox, the entire backfield. And then you look at the depth that they now have. I'm going to be interested to look at what the snap counts look like tomorrow. We'll have those up on Inside Carolina at some point, courtesy of PFF.
They're actually up now.
Are they up now?
Greg got them up now. Tamari Fox 44, Vahasik 37. So far less than the Strobridge and Crawford levels.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, those
they were
guys were averaging 60 snaps a game last year.
Yeah. And you know, what does it say, Tommy, since you're looking at it, like guys like Quadri Jackson and Asante and guys like that.
Yeah, so you have, just so we go through them, you got Gimmel and Surratt had 60 apiece, or 61 for Gimmel, 60 for Surratt. Quadri Jackson, you've seen Eugene Asante, 14 for Asante, 13 for Jackson. The building the depth thing, to your point here, is something that Bateman's going to be able to work on these first 2 weeks.
And I was actually going to mention Asante because you said 2 linebackers, and I was going to say I saw 3 that really, on that front in terms of inside backers that really stood out to me because I thought Asante looked really good.
I thought Kyler McMichael.
Yeah, he was the other guy I was going to call out because I thought he looked like the best defensive back out there.
And they just got so they would not mess with him. You know, they just stayed away from his side of the field. You know, Storm Duck made a few good plays. There's a time or two, you know, he could have gotten burned, and DeVito just wasn't on the money. But Storm Duck looked really good. Trey Morrison, that's Greg Barnes's guy. You know, everybody, all of those guys are a year better, and they're not asking as much from the Hosick and Fox tomorrow as they did of Strobridge and Crawford. So I'm feeling more optimistic, really, not based on, you know, them playing Syracuse, but just thinking about it overall in terms of, yes, they're going to have to prove that. And Fahasik did command a double team or two yesterday as well. They're going to have to prove that those guys could be who you want them to in the interior of that defense, because basically they played a 2-4-5 all day yesterday. I think they kept a nickel in on every snap. So,
the thing about calling that a 2-4-5, I think that's, I mean, it's really more of a 4-2-5 given the personnel, because I mean, I think Tomon Fox, for example, is Tomon Fox is more of an end than he is, you know, an outside linebacker in a lot of ways, 260 pounds. So, I mean, they really ran essentially a 4-2-5. It's just in their personnel, it's a 2-4-5 in terms of what they label these guys. But
right.
But for the most part, that's what they were in, and I think that's going to be their base all year.
Yeah.
One thing that stood out to me, and Jason, I'll let you comment on this. You know, the worries with the pandemic and all that, and guys being able to get ready for the season. Physically, North Carolina players impressed me. The look test. It looked like all of them had really improved their bodies from at least visually, and I think that speaks worlds to the program Mac Brown is building, but also to Coach Hess and that staff, especially given what 2020 has been like since, you know, for the past 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very clear since getting a chance to be around Hess a little bit that I think he's a stud. Carolina has one of the best strength coaches in the country with him, and he needs to be kept around pretty much at all costs. But I think that stood out, and it also shows the buy-in of your team.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as you mentioned, especially with all of the pandemic stuff and everything else and the limitations that you've had in terms of being able to get guys in for workouts on normal schedules and everything, these guys did their jobs. They did their work. And that's in a time where if you want to make an excuse to not be in there and do it, and, you know, you're not always able to be in there, you want to make an excuse, this was the perfect time to be able to do that. And I didn't see a whole lot of evidence of that. I did think the offensive line, and I know we're on the defensive side right now, but I did think the offensive line, a few of those guys looked a little overweight to me. There needs to be a little bit of in-season dieting perhaps, but other than that, I mean, that I think the whole team by and large they passed the eye test in terms of what you expect from a team that's going to realistically be in every ball game this year.
But your thoughts there? I mean, there have been plenty of times where Carolina looked physically outmatched over the last few years. It wasn't the case when Mac Brown was here the first time. But that's what's been impressive to me. And we talked about it, the whole past 6 months. We talked about it on the pregame show. Like Jason said, the buy-in from the players. And it's, staying healthy as far as the pandemic stuff. It's the doing the work in the off season, the strength and conditioning. Because when you look around the country, I mean, I haven't seen a program, not saying Carolina's the best team in the country. Do not mistake these comments for that. But as far as the program being in the best shape on a whole, given what they have, I think Carolina, from watching ball games this weekend especially, Carolina's in hearing the news about Virginia Tech, Virginia, and all these teams having to bail on games. I mean, I think Mac Brown's got this crowd in a good place, Buck, and to see them in week one, I think sort of fleshes that out a little bit. But am I crazy? Am I am I putting too many eggs in that basket?
Well, I'm glad you gave me a second question instead of the first question, because the first question would be very easy to answer. Yeah, you are crazy. But the putting too many eggs in one basket, there's been times, Tommy, when both of us, we've talked. And, especially at the beginning of a season, the first games that are being played, and we'll, watch an SEC game. And it doesn't have to be a super powerhouse SEC team. It could just be, whoever. And we'll watch them play, and then we'll watch North Carolina play, and it doesn't look like you're looking at the same division of football. Their players just look more athletic and more physical, and it's just played at a different level. And I think North Carolina is getting there. And one thing that I think, in addition to the, how they pass the look test, I think this is a noticeably faster team. I think there's more speed on this team than we've seen, especially on defense, than we have seen in a while. They've got some guys out there that can run. And that's not something that we've seen a lot of. We've seen it in, here or there, spurts, whatever. But you'd have to go back to at least the Butch Davis days. And I think the speed on this team is comparable to those Butch Davis teams.
Jason, last question about the defense before we take a break and move to the offensive side. We mentioned Kyler McMichael earlier. The defensive secondary, I think with a good quarterback wearing a Syracuse uniform, they score at least 14, 21 points. There were some drops. There were some missed passes. To that, Kyler McMichael looked like the guy he was recruited to Clemson to be on Saturday.
Oh yeah, he was a guy I definitely wanted to talk about here. I think it's that much more important because I think from what we saw of Patrice Rene, he's still not fully recovered. And I think the world of Rene. I think Rene's a really good player, but this gives them the luxury of being able to not push him back earlier than he's really ready to be able to be the player that he needs to be, because quite frankly, McMichael looked great. And those corners are really coached well. I mean, you got to tip your hat to Dre Bly as well, because you can see there are a couple places where you got a guy that's slightly out of phase and downfield against a guy, and his corners the last couple of years, they just don't panic, and that's coached into them. That's something that they do a really good job of, and that's got to be a serious coaching point for Dre and that staff, because it's something that you see consistently from their group. So tip the cap there, but they've got some dudes on the outside, and that they did not have that last year after Renee's injury, and now they actually have some opportunities there. I mean, you did see Trey Morrison get shaken pretty bad on the one that should have been a touchdown, but
cooked. He got cooked.
Yeah, he got that was not a good look. But and there were a few other little loose things in coverage that they'll clean up. But overall, that secondary is a good step forward in terms of giving Jay Bateman the flexibility to do a lot of the things that he wants to do as a coordinator. Now, the one other thing that I should mention that stood out to me at different points in the game is I did think that despite the eye test, despite the fact that they looked physically the way that I think, generally speaking, a Carolina defense should, I did think that there was, and this I think is to a large degree still the result of a lot of the limitations from COVID and not having the spring and all that. I thought they looked soft at times in terms of laying the lumber as in tackling, and in some of those aspects, there were things that defensively, I can tell you right now, Jay Bateman's not going to be real happy about how they tackled at different points. There are a couple guys that last year, the real knock on them, and I'll call the best player on the defense out on this as well. I mean, Chaz Surratt missed a couple tackles that you just can't miss. If you're that dude, you can't miss those tackles. And, you got both arms on him, you got your shoulder on him, and you let him slide off like that, you can't do that. And there were still some times where guys were catching instead of delivering the blow. And that's something that really needs to change for this defense to take the next step forward, which I think they took a nice step forward in this game against a bad offense. They did to a bad offense what a good defense is supposed to do. But when they start playing better offenses, they're going to need to be able to impose their will. And part of that is showing that you're the dominant, more physical player. There's an attitude aspect to defense that you need to bring. You need to bring that lumber. And they didn't do that enough for my taste. And I can tell you right now that the tackling aspect of things and just the overall physicality, playing with an edge, is something that Jay Bateman wants to see. And I didn't see that. So if there's a negative there, I think that's the negative on defense, is you need to see that defense play with more of a chip on their shoulder and a little bit more, a good bit more of playing on that edge, of playing through guys instead of catching them, and definitely not missing so many dang tackles.
I think that's a absolute fair point, and I think it's a function of still getting there. I think it's a function of good gracious, we've seen some awful tackling across the college football landscape this weekend, and
it was to be expected. Teams haven't hit.
Yeah, and you look at the Navy game. Good gracious, they didn't hit all the whole time, and the coach regretted that decision. And I will mention this: Clemson looked legit last night against Wake Forest.
What do you expect?
Yep, and that's the goal. People don't like to hear that, but that's the goal for this Carolina team to look like. Let's take a short break. Let me talk about Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Certainly great sponsors of Inside Carolina podcast, great friends of Inside Carolina, locally owned and operated. They are always at your beck and call if you need Carolina gear, both online and on Franklin Street. 20% off sales on the regular. And then you get these emails and they tell you we're having sales on Nike gear or on jerseys or anything you need. And then if you're Inside Carolina Premium subscriber, of course, you get 10% off your everyday order. I was waiting for the Jason Staples. There it is. A little much, fellas. Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. You need to visit them. You need to get your Carolina gear. One day there'll be fans in Keenan Stadium, and you'll need to get some new Carolina gear to support the Tar Heels when you get that chance, or wear at your home tailgate, anything. Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Take another short break, pay the bills on a national level. We'll be right back with more The Day After podcast. All right, we're back. It's The Day After. Buck Sanders, Jason Staples joined me, Tommy Ashley. 31-6, Syracuse goes down.
I think you mean Danny Ashley.
Oh, man, I have finally got it right. I will listen to people listening to this one that didn't. I was preparing for Syracuse, and for some reason the TV was up on Kelly Clarkston's show, and she's interviewing Danny DeVito for some reason. Yeah, and so it was meant to be. I will gladly report that during the pregame show on CHL in 97.9, I did not say Danny DeVito once. Didn't do it. That's professional, Jason. I was able to hold it together. Buck, I'm going to let you come in first on the offensive side. 31 points against Syracuse. Yes, I had it 59. I did not think Syracuse would score a touchdown, so there is that. But Sam Howell, I heard maybe Taylor Vipolis or no. I'm not going to corner Taylor on that. I got a text from a former Carolina guy that said it looked like Sam was trying to win the Heisman in game one. Maybe that's extreme, maybe not, Buck. But how you think the sophomore played on Saturday against Syracuse?
I don't know that I would go that far. I do think that Syracuse did a really good job, the best I've seen, really, at keeping the deep ball off of North Carolina's menu of things that they could go to. They just decided to sell out against the deep ball. And I do think that really frustrated Sam, and that, he maybe have got an attitude that, well, I'm going to show you, that, I can do whatever I want to do kind of thing and throw the ball in some tight windows. I think this is something that Trevor Lawrence was guilty of, and during his sophomore campaign, that all of a sudden he decided that he wanted to throw the ball in some tight windows at the very beginning of the year, more so than, later on. But anyway, I wouldn't go as far as to say he was trying to win the Heisman. I didn't think he made good decisions at times in choosing whether to run the ball or not. And there's some other things he probably could have done differently. But I'm going to chalk it up to Syracuse just deciding that we're going to sell out and we're not going to let you have anything deep. And North Carolina's wide receivers and their secondary, to their credit, did have enough athletes back there to, kind of help prevent Howell from being able to get deep on them. So, yeah, that's kind of the direction I would go.
Jason, pregame, you mentioned things you wanted to see from Howell and how he had progressed from year one to year two. Syracuse did have an All-American back there in Cisco, and he got one. Easy fly ball to center field interception for Cisco on that play. But we talked a little bit off air about Howell's performance, so I'm going to let you grade him out. This is your wheelhouse, and I thought he could have checked down more and had a field day. And Michael Carter, if you have Michael Carter in PPR leagues in fantasy, you're burning it up because that kid was special yesterday. But Sam Howell's performance, Jason.
I'd give him a solid C.
Wow, from the professor.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of to be expected against a defense where they didn't really know what to expect coming in. So it's not just that defense sold out to stop Howell, which they did, but it's a 3-3 defense, which is already a little bit tricky in terms of some of the stuff that they do. But they weren't sure what to what they'd see. And I think you saw that there were some places where he got fooled a little bit. The throw that you mentioned where, it's a high fly ball to center field situation was one of those where I think he got fooled and he got greedy. And they were trying to get him greedy. I mean, that's what they were aiming for. And I think he settled down once you got in the second half. I think he settled down and started taking more of what was given. But that tendency, I mean, he's a gunslinger mentality, and that tendency to want to take a little bit more is going to be something he's going to have to fight and have to manage all year. Because last year, teams, you got to remember, last year he was a freshman quarterback, and teams were coming into those games, especially early in the year, saying, we're going to make Sam Howell beat us. Well, he had some success in those games. This year, it's the opposite. And this is what we talked about in a prior episode in terms of how you brought up is the pressure on Howell going to be something that is going to really impact his sophomore year. We're looking at some potential sophomore struggles due to some of those, pushing to win a Heisman or, trying to live up to the pressure. And I don't think that's as much of what we're going to see as teams have tape on you. There's a year of, this is what he likes to do. This is what he does best. So let's take that away and let's see how good his left hand is for a basketball metaphor. Like, man, he's really good going right. All right, so we're going to take the right side of the court away. Every time he gets the ball, we're going to force him. We're going to see how he does moving to his left. And that was something that we saw in game one. That's what Syracuse did, is they made sure that he did not have those free vertical shots. It was not a situation where you had one-on-ones where a guy where Carolina's receivers had a good chance at 50-50 balls on those fade routes that he threw all year last year. And they played over the top and said, you're going to have to settle down and take those checkdowns all game. We'll see how patient you're willing to be. Now, here's the thing. If you're Sam Howell, that's ideal, because it's easy to throw those little checkdowns to Michael Carter and you just keep racking up stats. So that's good. If everybody's going to do that against Howell all year and he just decides to be willing to take what's free, then he could have some filthy numbers once again by the end of the year. But this was a good game to remind him that this is not last year. You're not going to see the same looks that you did last year. You're going to see some different things. And teams are going to try to take away what you like, what you had the most success with last year. That's just the way this is. It's like, again, to use a baseball metaphor, you got the pitcher who's got all the readout on, what the hitter hits well. And, you're going to want to make sure you locate in those blue zones. You don't want to throw in those red and orange zones. You're going to just keep throwing that down and in slider because he only hits 10% of that. And so you're just going to keep pounding that. And the guy's going to have to show that he can finally hit that ball. And, teams have the book on Howell. And that's what makes the sophomore year so hard, is after you have a great freshman year. Because freshman year, you're unknown. Sophomore year, teams have pulled you apart for a full off season. And now they're going to come in and throw a bunch of stuff at you. And this one was a really hard one because they're not only are they doing that, but you also don't know what they're going to do because of the new defensive coordinator. So I would give him a solid, I'd probably bump it to a C+, because I think he recovered some and did well in the second half. But I did think that he got greedy a few times and tried to force the ball, tried to push the ball in places where that stuff was probably going to be there last year. But I want to see him really come down, check down more often, and be a lot smoother in terms of recognizing, oh, here's what I see. I just got to get it out and get it down now. There were just too many cases where I didn't see quite as much quick process, just get the ball out to your check down, and those guys were there a lot. And so, I think there's good room to grow, but that's the kind of game you want to have, a room to grow situation where you win 31-6 and you're coming in with, your C+ game. That's a good sign.
Indeed, it is. Buck, we talked in the game plan podcast and those that everybody wanted to see Javonte Williams, Michael Carter nonstop. And I said, nah, Longo loves to throw it, and they're going to throw it no matter what. But that said, Michael Carter, I said just a second ago, looked fantastic. I mean, he looks faster. He looks more decisive running. He's my favorite player on the offense, I'll be honest. He does so many things. And then you have Javonte Williams coming in. The running attack is in good hands, Buck, is it not?
Well, here's the thing that should be talked about in when you get to that point of the program is red zone issues appear to have disappeared. Mm-hmm. They have figured out, hey, why don't we hand the ball to Javonte when we're down there around the the 4 or 5 yard line.
There was still one trip where they didn't do that, and I got upset. I can tell you that because they had a chance where it was like third and 6 maybe from about the 9 yard line or so. It was like, just hand it off to him one more time, and now you get 4th and 2, and you can do the same thing. And if he doesn't score on the first one, and they got cute and tried to run that little under boot, it's a little slip play to the H back, and tripped and wound up with a sack. And it's like, it's still there a little bit. They could have done it, and they could have done it one more time. But yeah, that's a good learning experience. Just hand it to that dude.
And there will be, situations where North Carolina is playing a much stouter defense as well in them goal line situations. But they didn't show a lot of hesitation yesterday as it got, into the fourth quarter. Hey, why don't we just hand this ball to 25 and see where that gets us? So, but yeah, the running game is in good shape. One of the things I was hoping for is that North Carolina would have a sufficient lead in the fourth quarter so that to start the fourth quarter, where they scored 21 points to get to 31, that we could see them try to build some depth at running back because, they're not going to have Michael Carter next year, and they may not have Javonte. I'd be a little surprised if they do. Now, don't everybody hit me up on the message board and suggest I'm trying to get Javonte Williams to leave. I'm just saying that's, one of the things that could be in his brain if he has a 1,000-yard season and, all kinds of accolades and looks as good as he did in game one. So, they're going to be one of the things you're going to be looking at, what we're going to be talking about at the start of 21, if Carter and Williams aren't there, is who's going to carry the rock. And I don't think we know that yet. I'd like to see them start working on that a little bit when they have an opportunity. But it's hard to say no. If you got Michael Carter and Javonte and you got your pick of which one you want to put in the game, it's hard to reach back to number 3 and say, hey, why don't you come in? Unless it gets to a situation where the outcome is no longer in doubt. But that's one of the things I'd like. Maybe hopefully they'll get to do that next week, and give some of these young guys a chance. DJ Jones and Elijah Green, see what they can do. You never know. Did we really know all there was to know about Javonte Williams the first game of his true freshman year? We did not. So anyway, I'll throw that in. And one other thing, if you'll mind me a small interlude here.
Hey, you're the president.
When we were talking about them not being nasty enough or having the edge on defense enough, and I don't disagree with that, but I just want to remind everybody of the years gone by when we saw the North Carolina run defense get gashed for 6, 7, 8 yards by everybody from Delaware to you name it. The two running backs that played, and again, they were the third, fourth option on a team that didn't have any great running backs. Their longest run, both of them, was 6 yards. Their longest run of the day was 6 yards. So the defense maybe not have rattled their molars when they hit them, but they got them on the ground. And, I'll take that as a starting point. Just want to remind people that what we're looking at now, and this goes to how expectations change, what we're looking at now is just different than what we saw against some of those UNC defenses that were continually gashed over and over and over again in the run game.
That is straight talk from a man that is still has some PTSD from past Carolina defenses. And I don't disagree. Looking at the stats, and if I could share my screen and not mess up this Zoom call for the YouTube people, Syracuse 1.9 yards a rush. And to the point where I said Longo likes to throw it a lot, Carolina 35 passes, 35 rushes. So stats end up telling the story sometimes, and sometimes they don't. But I certainly agree to what you said, Buck, and then maybe disagree to what I said about Longo likes to throw it a lot. Let's round the bend here, fellas, and I'll let you each get a word in here. I'll start with you, Jason. What needs to be worked on? Short, concise answers on one side of the defense, or one on the defensive side, one on the offensive side, and the area that we didn't even touch in the preseason too much, certainly not on the pregame show, is special teams. I think we probably could spend 30 minutes on special teams. But give me what you want to see better Saturday against Charlotte, Jason.
I think the first thing is better communication up front. I think they've got a lot of talent. This is on offense. I think they got a lot of talent on the offensive line, but there were times where there's just still some cleanup that you need to do, where there was some pressure at different points, or there were some leaks in the run game that were the result of maybe a little twist or some sort of stunt or that sort of thing from the defensive front, and guys up front weren't passing that off correctly all the time. Still some cleanup in terms of that up front, and you need to see that really get dialed in, so that you're not just letting the guy come in as a free runner at your quarterback or whatever. So that's the biggest thing is make sure that those guys are completely assignment sound and where they need to be on the offensive line. And the second one, and I'm going to go with 2 on offense. The second one is just take the free stuff, Sam. Take the free stuff that you're being offered when they're taking away your number one. Just come off of it right away and get it to the guy that's got to be open, that's got to be free. So those 2 things. And then on defense, it's tackling. It's just straight up physicality, and get guys on the ground and get them on the ground with a little bit of aggression. And don't take the blow, deliver the blow. To me, that's the one thing that the defense continues to lack, and they need to demonstrate that they're going to be that kind of physical, get in your face defense, beyond just being a well schemed and fundamentally sound defense. You've got to play on edge, and I want to see that from this Carolina defense.
Buck, close it out.
Well, what I'd like to see on Saturday is for North Carolina to stay just as vanilla on offense as they possibly can the entire game. What I'd like to see on defense from North Carolina on Saturday is to stay just as vanilla on defense as they possibly can. And get a lead and build some depth on both sides of the ball. One person I didn't want to give a shout out to, though, I know you mentioned that we hadn't really discussed special teams, but here's a name that nobody has spoken probably this entire off season, who was perfect yesterday, Jonathan Kim. kickoff guy, kicked off 6 times, kicked 6 touchbacks. And hey, people do not understand, I don't think, how big of a weapon that is. If you could keep the other team from having any kind of opportunity to have a kickoff return, that takes one headache off your plate.
Especially given how they covered punts a couple times.
Yeah. You know, I mean, in theory, for kickoffs, all you need is Jonathan Kim out there to kick the ball off. Everybody else can stay on the sideline because they're not going to have to tackle anybody. So, you know, I did want to mention Jonathan Kim. And, you know, he has such a good leg. If they could ever get him straightened out, he might be an option on. I know they tried, I think, last year to kick some long field goals. But, I mean, he was booting it, you know, to the back of the end zone almost every kickoff.
Yep, definitely a weapon there. I thought Grayson Atkins looked good. You know, hooked the long one a little bit, but definitely has the leg. Got to shore up the punt coverage and all that. I thought Daz Newsome was ridiculous returning punts. As long
Except
as
for the one he dropped.
I was going to say,
Got to catch it.
When he catches it, he's pretty dangerous. I'm not sure I like seeing a number 1 receiver out there doing that, but you play your best players. Buck and Jason, it's always a pleasure. It's always fun when we talk about North Carolina wins, especially when they're wins that there's plenty to talk about to get better at. And I think Carolina, you get a win in the win column, a 1 in the win column, and you still have plenty to work on Saturday going in against UNC Charlotte. Or excuse me, Charlotte. Don't text me or call me if you're a Charlotte fan. I understand it's Charlotte 49ers or Charlotte Niners or whatever it is.
Get
It's
it,
UNC Charlotte.
or they are going to call you.
I know, yeah. They will call me. It's always fun, guys. Appreciate y'all taking the time on a Sunday morning.
As always.
Yeah. Johnny T-shirt, Johnny.
Sunday morning
Thanks,
tradition
Danny.
continues.
Yeah. Thank you, Jared.
Thanks, Danny.
Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. Thank you guys for being our great sponsors. We'll all talk again soon. Thanks, guys.